Actually, let me do that. No, no, no. Do that. There we go. Let's eat some pills. Mm. Oh, so, can we come up with something today? That is a good question. I still have kind of a headache. So we'll see. We need a particle system. And I think I'm gonna write a separate renderer for this in the main controller. That's gonna do pretty much the same thing, I think. But I guess it's still a bit weird. I think the biggest question mark here is like how to handle the particles in the database. Let's just do it like this, I think. Let's just say that it's a class. And even though it'll be different from the rest of the system, let's build this system for the particles. Should a particle have a target? I'm not so convinced. I think a particle should have like only a position, an integer position, and that's it. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Because I was thinking like, okay, what if the emitter controls like the position and all of that? But that doesn't matter. Like, it's the same amount of data, it's the same amount of operations. It doesn't matter. It doesn't help anything. So we need another LOT particle emitter. What should the particle emitter do? Particle emitter should contain a list of particles. It needs 2 positions. It needs I'm not really sure how I prefer things. Like, I like the idea of having like an object that you can just like plug something in, right? So if I have a particle emitter and I just plug in the data for, you know, a torch emitter, then it'll become a torch emitter. But I also don't know if there's like any real purpose in that. You know, like the only purpose really is to avoid re-instancing. But is that really that big of a deal? I don't know if it is. Because now we're using, like, we can pool things instead. But I just don't know if it really matters. Like, with particles, I do think it matters. Particles should be pooled. They should not be re-instanced. And that's fine. All we're doing here is we're just linking it to a particle. And that's it. It doesn't do anything else. So the particle emitters need to fetch particles from a pool. This is definitely a system where pooling matters. It hasn't really mattered for anything else I've used it for so far. Yeah. But then I need a particle emitter data as well. And the thing is, if I do that, then I feel like this is actually really complicated. Not the particle thing, but just data management. Because as I keep going, what I'm beginning to think is that data shouldn't really be like assigned. It should be only referenced. And that means that in order to assign it, it needs to be loaded. And that means that we have to know what we're gonna load for the scene, put it in some lists, then reference it from there. But that's what's so difficult. Because that's where you have to like index every single thing. And that's what I don't like, really. I wonder, maybe you can index a dictionary using types. So that could be kind of interesting. Yeah, it seems like you can. That's kind of interesting. Because that means that you can potentially access something that's type, like, you can access the instance using the type because you already know what the type is. So that's like a built-in index. But that's assuming that you make a class for everything, which I am doing that for a lot of things, right? So I think that could work potentially. So for example, if I for the particle data, if we just make particle data like this, and then we make classes for each particle, that means I can just assign the particle data to a dictionary in the main controller, and then we can just access it by the type. Because we can make each particle emitter also be a class, so it just knows what it's looking for. That way, we don't need to use numbers to index. Yes. I think that makes sense. Particle emitter data. What does a particle emitter need to contain in terms of data? I think it might need to contain a list of LOT animations. Not really. What does the particle emitter data need to contain? It needs to contain everything. It needs to have a public void, virtual void, particle logic. I don't know what to call it. Particle animation list. Not really. Sorting layer override. Yeah, I can feel the headache creeping back in. We'll see how long this lasts. I should use my other chair for a while. I actually don't know if the particle emitter data needs much other than the particle logic. Particle animation list. Like, I don't feel like that's something it should have. The animations, the particles contain the animation. The particle emitter contains the particle list. The data, I feel, should just have logic almost. More or less. LOT particle particle data database. I'm just gonna call it particle database. Um, I don't really know what to say. Really organize this status effects. I kind of want public static class decals, maybe. But is the status effect really correct? Articles. Burning flames. See what I mean? Like, let's just do that. Call it ignite. And then, how do we want to handle this? See, I kind of don't... I'm kind of not a huge fan of the way I have been doing it, where it's like we have this static class that fetches the data, but I also think it's like okay. You know? So this would work the same as the animation database. Basically. But instead of this, And then here, this is one of those things where there are so many tiny little details that I don't really have concrete answers to. This is where we need to be able to fetch an animation as well. The question is, do I want to just fetch that animation here? I kind of don't think so. I think we should go through here as well. Like we have entities, effects. We should have a particle section, I think, where the actual animations are stored. Like, is status effects really where I want to put it? I mean, sure. It's probably fine. Like, generally, I think I don't want to reuse, like, the particle from a status effect somewhere else. And then we want to have a decals. That one is a little... I don't really know what to... Because it is technically a particle. Well, it's not... Rather, I was planning on using the particle system to just handle the decals. Which would kind of mean that the first thing that I do when I start combat is to create like a blood particle controller. Or I do that the second we need blood. And then I just keep it. But yeah. There's one issue right now. Well, I guess not really. The way an action works is that we fetch the data. Like, I'm fetching the sprite here on creation, and therefore we already have it loaded. It doesn't need to load from disk. It's already loaded. When Flame Blast is assigned as a skill. I can already feel my headache coming back. It starts good in the morning and then it just starts ramping. So we'll see what we can get done. I don't know if I need to like exercise my neck more or something. It feels like it's in the neck. Particle data. I'm a little worried that I'm overcomplicating things, but it is what it is, I think. So we have... If I have a static ignite here, the thing is, we actually have... We actually have... So I feel like I have a choice here. Because right now I have 3 different flames. And... well, actually I don't. I was planning on having 3 different flame variants, but it ended up just being 1. Because I had to combine them all to get a decent looking animation. So I have 1 fire animation with 3 stages. And we'll see how that works out. Maybe I will have to make more. But the question then is, should I split it up into 4? So we have like, or 5 rather. So we have the startup, we have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 flame strength, and then we have an outro. Though the outro would There could potentially be 3 different outros. But I could potentially also just make it go down through the tiers as part of its like getting snuffed out animation. Like it goes from 3, 2, 1, and then maybe even just reverse the intro. Like that could work. You have the deepest voice ever. Thank you, Louise Fitness. How's it going? I'm not German. Because the question here is like, if I don't have each step, like each tier, baked into the same animation, then changing the intensity of the particles on the fly would be annoying. But that also means that the particle now has to contain like logic for that. And that means the particle data, wherever that went. Particle data. Like the particle itself contains time index, transparency. Maybe I should move that into the particle data itself. And then we only handle the position. Because not everything necessarily has an index or has like a time or transparency. That's something that could potentially be just stored in the particle data and handled there. And it wouldn't even necessarily be something that needs to be here. It could be in the particle data class that inherits from particle data. Where'd it go? There. But here I'm not doing that right now. Am I? Yeah, no, now it's just particle data and we do request data. But yeah, instead it could be that we say that this is a class called Ignite that inherits from particle data. Right? And then that ends up with that. And then we can say like time index, transparency maybe exists here, potentially. But I do feel like most particles would need a time index, and I don't know if it really matters. I feel like the particle should probably contain that. The transparency could just be a byte. It doesn't need to be a float. Now, I also wonder if the particle data should be loaded here. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Because I was thinking, like, I could have the particle data be loaded in the emitter, and then we reference the emitter and we read that or something. But it doesn't change anything. Because the idea here is that the particle data, this should just be a reference to the particle data somewhere else. Particle database. Yeah. I'm just simultaneously thinking about how to handle data side of this, because I feel like and that's why I'm so unsure, because I'm not really sure. So I also don't feel like I necessarily can do that right now, because what I'm thinking is that when I load a level, then we need to know at that point exactly what can exist in that level. And the way that should then work is that each object... I think each object should basically contain a reference list of everything that it needs in order to function. And then we should load those things in to like a centralized database in the main controller that contains all the animations, all of the data and all of that. And then things should reference that. Instead of loading it on the fly. But I also don't know, I feel like I'm overcomplicating that too, because I do think that like just instantiating on the fly as well would probably be fine. But or like the particles, I definitely feel like it should be like that to some degree. They should be, the data should be stored in a list in the main controller. And instead of like each particle containing a new instance of the data, they should just read it from the main controller. And the reason I'm thinking of like the way like that should be how everything else works, it's just based on that really, because it's like why shouldn't it? But it is kind of complicated, and it also means that in the test level I would need to like preload everything, which is also kind of stupid. Unless I just don't, you know, make it a special case. This is why I've been a bit stuck, because I feel like there are some details here that I'm not really sure how to handle. And they're a little tricky to figure out when you have a headache. But I feel like either way, Either way, the system here should really be the same. It's just a question of, do I assign the data into the objects themselves and then handle it from there? Or do I assign it to a centralized point and then everything references the one instance? So here, this isn't how it should work. This shouldn't take anything. This shouldn't really do anything. It can set the sublayer or the sorting layer override to null. And we're just fetching information here. So this is where it should be set. Sorting layer of Ignite should be dot object, and the LOT sorting sublayer should be effect. Probably. But I do feel like I need more I need more layers. Which I can have now. There's no limit. Because it's just using a relative system now, and it's not using any kind of like hard number system. Because that's what you can do. Like the Y sorting, for example, it's the same thing more or less, where you just change the render order based on the Y position. That's a cat. And then the animation needs to be set up so that we have an actual animation. This is how it works. I don't know if this is stupid, but it seems fine. The database is basically just a bunch of static classes nested into each other as a way to like sort and order everything. And then it just contains a static request animation function that generates the animation by loading it from disk. Or loading it from resources. I guess I need to actually create the animation. So the option here is I could put it all into just one file. And then in order to create like any of the tiers, we just loop it through a certain time section. It's either that or I split them all out into a bunch of different files, but I think it would probably maybe be easier to do it all in just one file. Sprite sheets, effects, entities, articles, status effects, ignite. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. Here. Right. I am indeed Matt Blackenbaker. How's it going? Oh, yeah. Okay, so we have a data path here somewhere. I probably need to add something to the data paths here. I don't know if this is a stupid way to do things. Public static string. Articles folder. Where is it? It's in particles status effects. The reason I'm doing this is so that if I need to change, like, the name of a folder, I can just change it here instead of having to change it in 6 million different places. Status effects folder plus ignite slash something. Did you hear of Kib's sick ramblings of liquid flame? No, I did not hear that. I'm also sick. I've had a headache since Monday. And it's pretty bad. I have not been paying attention too much. What was Kim talking about? A liquid flame. What was that about? Kims. What was that about? So we'll find out. Ignite. It's set to allow loop, allow mirror. Should be false. Should it? Maybe it should be mirrorable. Ignite. And how many frames was it? 33. 33, and they're all 1 frame long. 33. And then we need to go back to the particle database. The animation is now LOT particle, no, LOT animation database dot particles dot status effects dot ignite dot request animation. That's that. Then is the sorting layer is set to object, sorting sublayer is set to effect. But I do think that it should be set to detail. Because an effect is like a lightning bolt striking there. And that should have like, how do I put it? Priority over like burning effects and stuff on the character when we're rendering. All right, so we have a particle with some particle data here. And then we have a particle emitter. And the particle emitter right now doesn't do shit. Bro. So we have a particle database. We have a particle emitter data. And we need an LOT particle emitter database. And I don't know if I split this into particles and decals. There's not really supposed to be a difference. I just feel like maybe I want to do that. Just so it's clear. I don't know if I want decals to be like its own system. It should maybe be, but I don't know yet. And decals is like blood on the ground, explosion effects, that kind of stuff. Or like the aftermath of an explosion, right? For example. It's a dog. Particle emitter data. But right now, I don't know what it would need. Is the I mean, it would need some things. And for the emitter, it doesn't matter if it has more stuff in it, because the emitters are going to be much less frequent than the particles. So it would need a time index. But what did I say? I have a particle emitter, right? It contains a list of particles' positions. So the emitter data needs to have a time index, at the very least. So this needs to have a public override void particle logic, where we handle that. And it isn't exactly data, it's like a module. I'll be right back. Okay. Let's push a while longer. I feel like this is going to be a little complicated. The particle emitter data. We do want to have access to the particle. Wait, that's the particle. But yeah, sure, yeah, I guess. I was actually thinking of the emitter. Particle emitter. Shit, where is everything? There. I don't even know what I was doing. Part something. Oh, holy shit. I bought my mom one of those rice bags. Or... I think they fill them with oats nowadays. That you heat in the microwave and put around your neck. Should probably get one of those for myself. Yeah, I don't know if I can manage this right now, honestly. I feel completely obliterated. We've got a particle. It's got data. Like, it's just too much with a headache. Particle data, ignite. So what you should have to do is you should have to fetch a particle emitter from the emitter database. Particle emitter database. So we should fetch ignite. And so ignite already has no, this is emitter data. Yeah, okay, so but what I needed, okay, I remember. What I need is a target. And that should then be inside of the particle emitter. Public LOT object target. Then we might have it look like this, and then this should say position raw equals target dot position test dot position on both. Hello, Master Morty. I'm doing fucking awful. How are you doing? I have a big headache that I've had since Monday. It makes it hard to program video games. I should honestly just buy one of those for myself. Like, they only cost $200. I've spent too much money. What is this? This is... This is a seed oil, bro. What is this? That's also seed oil. Is that everything that they have? You just put seed oil in your nose? I don't want that. Man, everything's so expensive. What am I working on? I'm working on a particle emission system, which means I'm creating an entire system inside of the main controller, which is like the main script, where I'm going to store particle emitters that have like either a position assigned to them or a target object assigned to them. That means they will, in that case, they will track the object, and the particle emitter will contains a data class, which is going to be like a plugin. You just pop it in, and then that handles the particles and like its logic. And then I'm gonna reuse the particle emitters and just like put them in a pool. And same thing with particles. Particles are also gonna be pooled so that a particle just contains a position, and I think the time index and transparency should just be in the particle data. Doesn't really matter a huge lot. But that way we can just pop in like new data into each particle, and then it just does something new, like, or it has a new animation really, because the particle itself shouldn't do much. The emitter should animate it and like move it around. Well, it should move it around, but the animation I think should be handled inside of the particle itself using the time here. And that's what I'm doing, and I'm setting up like stuff. Seed oils in what? No spray? Yes, but it's an oil-based nose spray for lubricating your nostrils. So it's easy to be able to create new particles later on. Yeah, it's one of those things, like, I was doing like object pooling before, but I realized later that it doesn't really matter for my objects because there aren't that many objects. There isn't like a lot of things being created and destroyed, so it doesn't matter. It's still something I can do in case there is ever like a chugging from spawning in like a summon or something, but I don't think there will be. But in cases of a particle, that might, even for just a torch, that might be creating and destroying particles like several times a second. And in that scenario, it's better for the emitter to like have its own pool, I think, maybe, where it reuses like the ones that it's already used, and then just having like a large pool of particles that can just be assigned to emitters, and then they just reuse those over and over. Because that way nothing has to be destroyed, nothing has to be recreated ever. We just kind of change the time value back to 0, or, you know, just set it to not be visible for a second or something until we reuse it again. So that should be a lot faster. It's like it'll help in the long run with optimization when you start really adding lots of effects. Yeah, and I also kind of just need a way to do these things in the first place, so just doing it like that is just easiest. Alright, well, give me a sec. I'm just gonna pay for something here real quick. pay with Swish. Yeah, alright. There we go. I ordered one of those bags. Yeah, I don't know if it will, but we'll try. So here now in the main script, references, lists, arrays, effects. We can put it there, why not? LOT, particle emitter. Particle emitters. List. But then we also need pools. Pool. Didn't I have like a separate thing? Object pool. I guess not. So we have a particle emitter list, and we also want a public list of LOT particle pool. Particle, what should we call it? Inactive pool. And then we want a particle pool that says active pool. Maybe. Do I care for that? Because the particle, like, because the way you can do it is you have two pools, one that's an inactive one, and then that's where we pull from. And then we return them later when they're done. And then you have an active pool where you put them, and then you know that these are active, and maybe you need to like run through them and like call updates or something. But for the particles themselves, I think it would be fine to just add them to an emitter and remove them from the pool. And then simply... Maybe not. Maybe we should have two pools. And the reason for that is so that we can have a particle limit. That's just something. Because that way we can track how many particles are currently active. But we also want the same thing for particle emitter. And in that case, this emitter list is and we can write it here just for now. So how this is going to work is we're going to need something like public LOT particle emitter request emitter. And then that's just going to say if particle inactive pool dot count is greater than 0, then emitter to return. Then we're gonna say if particle inactive dot count is greater than 0, then emitter to return equals particle inactive pool 0 particle emitter there. And then we say particle emitter inactive pool dot remove at 0. And then we say return emitter to return. Else, it doesn't like that it's not necessarily assigned, but if we make an else here, then it will be assigned. Then we're gonna say particle emitter inactive pool dot add new LOT particle emitter, and then it takes an object or a target. I'm actually not sure what we're fetching here. Maybe this should just take nothing as well. And then we say position raw is vector 3.0 and position is vector 3 int.0. Oh yeah. Will most effects and animations have a similar system for storing and retrieving data they need to use? I know next to nothing about coding. Well, it can. I was thinking about that, but I'm not really sure how I want to handle it. And right now I don't think it really matters, but yeah, the way you can do it is let's say we're making an RTS, right? And we have like 400 zerglings on the screen. Some ways to handle that is to create like an animation, or like you can create like a class which is kind of like a container that contains the entire like animation and everything it needs. Yeah, like all of the directional animations and everything. And then you just assign that to the object itself. And then the object like just has a little timer that it iterates up every single frame. And then that determines like which part of the animation are we in. And then it also has like a direction that decides like which frames are we using from the, or which sheet of frames are we using. But that means that you have to like assign that to every single object, and every time that there's something called instantiating, and that means that you kind of create a new copy of something. So if you put a new copy of the animation data into every object, that's like a lot of repeated information, right? But when you have a small amount of objects, it doesn't matter if you do that, because there's just so much room that you don't need to care about it, and that's the case we are in. But you can also just say that, okay, we have a zergling on the screen, then you just load its animation data, you just put it in a little list somewhere, and then the only thing you handle inside of the Zergling itself is like, which direction is it looking, what is its current time, and then you kind of just look at the animation data, and then you just read that and just set his frame based on that, right? That way you just have a bunch of objects just looking at something over there, instead of them all having a copy of the data inside of themselves. And that's kind of what I'm looking at here, because right now, every object has... But it doesn't matter that much, because like Rhea, there's only one Rhea, right? There could be like 10 Nephir Spearmen, but even then 10 is like whatever, you know? Like if they have 10 copies of their animation data, it just doesn't matter. And it makes it a little easier as well to program when they just handle themselves like that, and you just like load it all into the object. But for the particles, it does matter, because the particles, not only do we want to pool the objects, it's called object pooling, by the way. You want to pool the objects so that you can reuse the same objects over and over again without having to like destroy them and recreate them. But we can also do the same thing with the data, that instead of having like 400 particles that all contain a copy of a flame animation, we just have like, yep, we have flame particles. So now I'm storing the flame animation data in one place, and then they all just access that and read that. That's the idea, at least. I'm not too familiar with particle systems, but I think I understand the basic concepts, really. What am I reading? You're German? I'm not German. I don't know why someone thought that. Nope, I'm Swedish. Okay, so there now we have particle emitter. Close enough. It's miles of difference. Miles. Basically not even the same species. So here we'll say emitter to return equals new particle emitter. And then here we add now we don't need to add particle emitter active pool, but add emitter to return. And then here we want to add to the emitter to return to the active pool. And then do we do that? This should also, but it just doesn't matter right now. But it should have a way to just say, like, deny the request based on, you know, if particle emitter active pool dot count is greater than particle limit, then it should do more, but it can return. Here, if the count is greater than 0, else if the count is 0 in the inactive pool, but if the active pool has a count greater than the particle limit, then we'll return null. And then that needs to be handled. Two hours, 23 minutes. Oh, I feel so pathetic just having streaming, like, if I stop now, but Jesus. Let's keep trying. But I'm getting kind of close to a point where I'm not really sure where to go. And I can't think because my headache is too bad. Particle emitter. And this needs to have the same thing, except this should be a particle. And then this should say request particle. Yeah, we're doing particles. I started doing it Monday, but I've had a headache since Monday and it's not getting any better. So I think a lot of this might be kind of messed up. Well, we'll see. I'm trying to pool them now. And I'm not sure if the logic is sound. Let's add a empty constructor, and it should be vector 3.0. Yeah, I should rest, but fuck it. We'll get some rest later. Get a little bit done, at least. And the particle data just just set it to null. Particle inactive pool. Particle. Yep. Just gotta get rid of everything that says emitter here. Okay, so here we can now fetch particles. And public int particle emitter limit equals 50 or something. I don't know. That's what this should say. And so that's where we ask for emitters and particles. And then public void return particle LOT particle. Then we're gonna say if particle inactive pool dot count. Let's see, public int particle. What should we call it? Lower limit equals 50. We want to have 50 particles to go, maybe. And then we're gonna say if the current inactive count is greater than or equal to particle lower limit, then we'll just return. Else particle inactive pool dot add particle. Maybe. The particle should also be deactivated, which I'm not really sure what I want to do with that, but particle dot position. Well, no, we want a reset. Let's not do it here. Public void reset particle. And then that's just gonna do this, basically. And then the question is how to handle the rendering, if that should be in the particle data. I was also thinking of breaking out the rendering system from the object. Because it's got all these things here. But I don't know if that's a good idea. I might just write something new, even if it's a bit of repeated code. But I have also been thinking that this whole system here should probably just be like a function inside of the main controller or something that would just pass the object through in order to render. That's kind of what's happening already if you actually take a look. Like, the object... This shader is just stored in the main controller. So we are actually just running all of these objects through the main shader in the main controller, but it is doing it after setting all of these values that exist inside of the object itself. And that's why I'm not sure if I really want to break it out, because I feel like it's just going to make it clunky and shitty. And on top of that, even if I were to make like a renderer component, this is an object, so I feel like it would be kind of annoying and shitty to make it read like both an object and a particle, because they're... Like, if I were to go back, I think a particle would be like the minimum. Like, a particle would be basically just an entity, and it would just have a position. Almost. But the position is actually kind of complicated. But I could make it have a position, but it's like a virtual position, and then in the object itself we just override it. Because the position in the object right now is a little complicated. Because it's doing all kinds of things here. It's running like dual scene position modifier, position checks and stuff. And it's also setting the position is actually a struct I made myself. That also contains like position, size, offset, bounds, outer bounds, inner bounds, all kinds of stuff. But I still think the object particle is usually a container of primitive types. I'm not sure what that means. Built-in types. So just like booleans and integers. But yeah. Right now the particle is a position and a raw position. But that's just because the raw position is logic, the other position is rendering. Direction, vector, UV. Yeah. So at the moment I do have a target here. I'm not sure if I want that. I think the target should just be stored in the emitter. So right now it's a raw position, which is the logical position for when we're just updating stuff, and then a vector3 int position, that's the rendering position. It's the position locked to the pixel grid, which I don't really need to have that as a stored value, because you can just floor the position raw. But it's one of those things where I kind of just put it there in case the thing doesn't move, then we don't need to keep flooring every single frame. And then it has a data, which is a reference to the data. And then the data contains some other things like time index. Actually, the particle itself needs to have the time index, I think. There's no single kind of particles. You might have many different, e.g. a very lightweight which you spawn in masses, sparks, or very fat ones where you spawn few. Animated explosion sprite. Right. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was doing here with the particle data. I do think that the particles should have a time index, because what I wanted, the way I wanted to handle this is that the particle data is just a reference to the data stored in a list. So each particle doesn't actually have the particle data instantiated in itself, but rather it's just reading it from a list in the main controller. And that's where we can create here in the particle data. We then create like an ignite class here that inherits from particle data, and then that can be as clunky and complex as it wants, or as empty as it wants to be. And then we just plug in the data into the particle. That was the idea. And other stuff like logic, like how they behave, their lifespan, and all of those kind of things, handled by the emitter. So, well, it does have a time index, and then the time index would be its lifespan and its animation time. More common is to have a particle container for that particles of that type and usage. I guess. But I think this would be fine, right? You can place effect in the world that affect particle pools that intersect the bounding box of that effect, e.g. blowing fan. A particle container for the particles of that type and usage. So you mean, if I understand this correctly, you mean, for example, let's say we have sparks from torches or something. And then I have like 10 torches. That means 10 emitters. Then we still have like a container for sparks so that I can specifically affect sparks using an outside force. Like a sparks list, for example. Or is it's more like, because right now the way I'm thinking of it is that the emitter is like the biggest thing, but in reality maybe I should have another step so that I have a list of like current particle types, like a list of particle types. And then the particle type contains a list of particle emitters. And then each emitter contains a list of particles. I think I can see that. Yeah, I think that could be cool. That also means that we could add wind, for example. We could just say that the wind, that there's a current wind effect on the map, even though it's just like a little bit. And that way I could just naturally say that everything that, like, every spark is affected by the wind. And then we just modify the values based on the current wind by just going through this, like, each spark. I think that could be cool. Especially with, I add like wind sources. If you go super fancy, you can string particle logic together, e.g. if a particle dies, e.g. a rock, it will spawn other types of particles, e.g. explosion or water splash. Emitter is then just some object with a spawning pattern. Right. Right. Yeah, makes sense. Let's see what we can figure out, but I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. So let's see if this is a stupid way of doing this. Let's go to the main controller and then we set up a public dictionary of type, and it takes a list. The value is a list of LOT particle emitters. Particle emitter container. Like that. And then the idea is that particle emitter data. I guess I think it would be best to do this where it gets fetched. But I could do something like main controller dot control dot particle emitter container dot contains key type of ignite. No, we can't do it here because this is in the emitter data. But this is the idea. Like if it doesn't contain this, then we'll add type of ignite and new list particle emitter there that we then add this to. Else, if it's true, then we simply access using type of ignite equals dot add the value. But we have to do this in the particle emitter. I thought of this earlier, and I thought it seemed like a nice way of handling this. This should actually not have an else. It should just say that way we create a key in the emitter container dictionary that is the key itself is the type of emitter that we're trying to add. And if that already exists, then we just add this new emitter to the container. Otherwise, we create the emitter key value inside of the container, and then we add. And it's a list. Well, we can say that this is emitter data instead. That way we don't have to type of. Wait, hold on. No, this won't work. we have to take the type. Actually, I don't know if we'll be able to do that, because I don't know if here it says particle emitter data, for example, if we try to do the type of that, even when we have assigned like an ignite to it, that might just give us the base type instead of the true type. I'm not sure which one it'll give us. I already have it set up, kind of. So, public test class base, test class base. Test class base equals new test class inherit. And then debug.log type test class plus type of test class base. I don't know if type of has an inherent way of printing itself, but let's find out. Type test plus test class base. Yeah. No. There. We can't do type of that. Dot. Get type. How about that? Test class inherit. Okay. That's good. So we're actually getting the inherited version. Okay. Just needs to do emitter data get type instead. There. And then that should be good.
that's a kangaroo. And then the unfortunate thing about a dictionary is that I feel like there's no good way to iterate through it. Like for each works, but this like if you need to like destroy the thing, well, you can do it as long as you just like store like this one needs to be destroyed in a list, and then you destroy them after the for each is over. So I guess just for eaching is fine. But it's not as easy as just doing a for loop. But it's not that much harder. The particle late update. I feel like particles should be handled in late update before everything else. It's either that or it's just in update, but last. Update mouse. FPS counter, draw combat grid. Effect update. Init timeline lerp. Interface. We could do it here. After effect update, we can do a particle update. On particle update job schedule. No, Unity, that's not what I wrote. There we go. Particle update. And then that's gonna be a for each I in particle emitter container. And then that should just be i.update. i.value.update. But we haven't actually added an update to the particle emitter. What did I just do? Particle emitter contains update. Oh, right. It's a for each And each I is actually a list. So uh, I var plist dot value dot count. This is plist dot value dot update. The main controller. There. That's how we do that. And a list of types. That's emitters to destroy. This new list. Make sure it's cleared, and then here what we should say is if plist.value.count equals 0, then emitters to destroy.add plist dot key, and then after that's done, we're gonna do for emitters to destroy dot count emitters to destroy well, actually it's particle emitter container dot remove emitters to destroy I. Hello, David Hards. How's it going? This year I got him. Need to make dev category my #1. Go for it. What are you trying to make? I'm working on a particle emission system. Because I want to add particles to my game. We're making a turn-based RPG called Legends of Terrestria. And I'm trying to add particles so I can create a particle system for like adding fire effects or something to characters when they're ignited or stuff like that. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm learning the basics. Well, that's a good first step. Is it bad that I pirated Sprite just because I don't have enough money? Yeah. But I don't care. I want to do a checkpoint system in my game. All right. Yeah, that's doable. Um, yeah, well, platformer isn't a bad place to start. Pretty easy. Teaches you most things. I feel like I've gotten kind of far here, but I'm getting a little bit lost. Let's add a for loop for particle list dot count, and then we'll say particle list I, and then we go to the particle and we say that the particle has an update. Update takes a main controller dot controller, not main controller, main controller. And really all we're doing then is setting time index plus equals main controller dot current logic delta time. And that's kind of it. Particle data dot particle public virtual void update main controller. And that's about it. I'll make a farming sim. Sounds good. And then we just hit an update there and we toss in the main controller. And now we can basically just run the update that way. Not sure I needed those containers. Because the logic is contained in the emitter anyway. So if the emitter needs to check for wind, I think it could just do it anyway. But it's fine. Might come in handy anyway. Got an error. Where's the error? Update. Particle data dot update. Main controller. I don't know why I insist on passing in the main controller when I've already created a static accessor for it. And it's a singleton anyway. So I can't decide which I want to do. Apparently. And now I'm not really sure what to do. I feel like we're getting close to the point where what we need to do is just add the ability to spawn these things. So on Ignite, when a character becomes ignited, that needs to... I feel like that's the first thing we should add. And that would be in the combat module. What did I call it? Burning add. Burning stage plus power. If burning stage equals 0 and power is greater than 0, then main controller dot... Yeah, this is where we need to add burning or add ignited particle emitter.
Let's see, particle. So here we're requesting an emitter. I'm just thinking how this should be handled. But it could be something like LOT particle emitter. Emitter equals main controller dot request emitter. And then emitter dot set data LOT emitter database dot particles dot status effects dot ignite dot new data. And see, this is where things what if we say that the set data here just takes a type? Do you think we can instantiate a new class from a type? It's probably something that you can do, right? And this is then type of ignite. I'm just wondering if I always worry that I'm overcomplicating things. Particle emitter container dot contains key. This is where we add to container. Emitter data type. No, we should do it has to be a type here in that case. Perhaps. Or maybe we do the other thing first. it would need to be something like public dictionary type LOT particle data. Particle data list equals new list, new dictionary. Data dict. And then here we're gonna say if main controller dot control dot, and no, I'm not doing the main controller thing again. Particle data dict dot contains key emitter data type. Then we are going to say main controller dot particle emitter container. No, this is add to container. And then we want to access this using the emitter data type dot, which gives us particle data. Oh, I only did one. Okay. Particle data. Particle emitter. And then this is particle emitter data. Though I don't know. I think maybe the emitter should actually have instantiated data. I don't know. I kind of think so, because I don't know. Like, what would it need? It would need... It would need a time index. I don't know what else it would need, really. Yeah. I don't know. We almost made it to 4 hours.
But I think this might be my limit for today. I think we did well, considering that I have a huge headache. I think this is almost functional. I'm just not sure if the emitters should, like the emitter data, should be centralized or not. But I think it can be. It's just like, okay, I might need to add a couple more like integers or whatever to the emitter itself, but that doesn't really matter that much because there won't be like a million emitters. It's not really that big of a deal. Because I'm just thinking, because it might need to have like stages or something. But I don't really think so either. I think it just needs to have a time, because then you can run the time through the data container, and then the data container just handles like editing the whatever the time needs to be. Like if the time needs to loop from like 7 to 12, then we can just do that by just entering that into the update, more or less. I approve it. Sounds good. I'm glad. It does seem kind of weird. Like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm kind of doing things differently than I am doing everywhere else. And I feel like maybe things should be done differently elsewhere. But I also don't really want to go and muck things around. With few emitters, you might be even happy to not centralize it, because then you can individually modify it, e.g. spawn rate of some blood emitter. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's kind of what I meant. But even if I don't centralize it, it can be done. Or even if I do centralize it, it can be done by just having like 2 integers, you know, on each emitter, and then you just use those. But the danger with doing stuff like that is that now, for every single like particle emitter that you're going to make in the future, you're now working with this limitation that, yeah, we have 2 integers that we can use to affect like which stage we're in, or speed and stuff like that, spawn rates. So I don't know. I think it would be fine. Like, I think it's fine to instantiate a lot of this. I do think I'm overthinking it when it comes to instantiating the data otherwise too, when it comes to characters and objects, because we're not gonna have like 100 units on screen. So I am overthinking that for sure. The main reason I am thinking about stuff like that is to avoid like loading from disk when I want to spawn an effect from a spell, for example. But I think it's already loaded from disk when the spell is instantiated as a spell in that character's pool of abilities. We've already fetched the animation, and we've already fetched the sound effect and everything, and it's just stored in there. So I think it's all good, really. I think it's all good. I'm just overthinking it. Because the reality is, what I am thinking of is actually correct when it comes to like how to optimize all of those things for like loading the data and stuff. But it doesn't matter for what we are doing. Like, if I were to use this engine to convert it into some kind of RTS engine, it would 100% matter then. But right now it just doesn't. So it's fine. It's fine. We can have a little bit more data loaded in. It doesn't matter. But yes, we might play some Project Gorgon tonight, but we might not. I don't know. My headaches start out like really like almost undetectable in the morning, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse until it's night, and then it's the worst, and then I go to bed and then it's fine. So hopefully tomorrow it's over. But yeah, until then, thanks for hanging. Have a good day.